Welcome back to Ascend Legal 101. I'm Ramona, and today I'm joined by Christy Pratt, who is a visionary business leader and real-time court reporter in Vancouver, British Columbia. She has reported several landmark Aboriginal trials and constitutional challenges, many of them exceeding 150 trial days. Christy ran her own court reporting firm in British Columbia for 15 years, and she acquired 4 additional firms over the past 2 years. In July 2021, all 5 of these firms joined Veritext Legal Solutions, who provide services across North America, and Christy is now the Vice President for the Canadian region. Christy embraced entrepreneurship early in life. Before becoming a court reporter 25 years ago, Christy was a legal assistant, and before that, she worked in her family's restaurant business. Christy is passionate about mentorship, and she embraces a growth mindset. She works with an executive coach, and her word for 2022 is mindful. She finds joy and balance in cooking and travel, particularly when blended together. She will be going to a cooking school in Italy in October with her partner Erik, who lives in Washington State. Please help me welcome Christy Pratt. Welcome back to Ascend Legal 101. Today I'm joined by Christy Pratt, who is the Vice President of the Canadian region. I was just going to say the Vice President of Canada. I like that better, for Veritext reporting. And all of us in British Columbia would know her as Reportex, full stop. So welcome today. Thank you for joining me today, Christy.
Thank you, Ramona. I'm delighted to be here.
I have 100 questions for you, but this month I'd like to keep our focus on mentorship and mentoring opportunities. And what I love about you is your story, you know, where you started and how you got to be, you know, the Vice President for Canada. So
sounds very dramatic.
I know, but I'm going to keep saying it that way too, on purpose, because I really like it. We'll get you a t-shirt.
Perfect. Let's go with it.
So can you tell me sort of where you started and how that all went?
Sure. Well, I don't think you need me to go back as far as 1974. I grew up in the family restaurant business. My parents bought what would end up being their first of 3 restaurants when I was 6. And when I was 11, I got to help in the dish pit. And by the time I was 13, I was hostessing. And, you know, then shortly after that, I was waitressing. And so I was really raised in an entrepreneurial environment. And, you know, I became a legal assistant right out of high school. I took a 10-month program and worked at a law firm after that for a bit. And then I became a court reporter. And, you know, throughout all of that was the thread of leadership and business ownership in my family. My brothers has owned and operated several different types of businesses as well. And so when I became a court reporter, and I did that for, well, this will be my 25th year of court reporting, actually, 2022. But when I first started court reporting, I had just a devastating first experience. My initial job was it felt to me like it was a bit of a train wreck. And it started when I administered the incorrect oath to the witness. And I didn't realize it was the wrong oath. And counsel, who's still practicing today, very gently reminded me or corrected me that I had not administered the correct oath. I was mortified. I switched a few words up and hoped I would get it right the second time. I did not. Finally, he took pity on me and told me, Madam Reporter, witnesses are not required to tell the whole truth at discovery. And I had administered the court oath, which is, do you swear that you shall tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? And so I learned something that day. I learned something that day that I should have learned before I became a court reporter or before I did my first live job. And in that moment, I knew that when I owned my own firm, my reporters would never feel that they did not have the tools that they needed in order to succeed in the job. Reputation is everything in this industry. And if you don't even know something as simple as which oath to administer, it really will, it'll shake your game. And it definitely doesn't help you build confidence. And it makes you look like you don't know what you're doing. I was 25 years old and 24, 25 years old in a room full of, easily 100 years of experience. And so when I bought Veritext in 2006, I really developed it on this concept of mentorship and teaching. And I've really thought of Veritext as a teaching firm. We would take reporters right out of school and we would bridge that gap between their training, their technical training in their court reporting program, and the realities of being a court reporter and what that actually looked like on the ground. And so, it really is. And even before that, in my late teenage years, I taught piano a million years ago, and I had time to actually play instruments. And so, I just sort of built on that thread and continued into running Veritext, and it's just really developed and grown from there. I find it incredibly rewarding and fulfilling. I feel an incredible amount of responsibility to new reporters when they come out of school, because there's just so much that they do not know.
Right. What I really loved, just even in the story you just told, was that you knew when you owned your own company that this wasn't going to happen to the people who worked with you or for you. And I mean, even just to be that young and have that sort of foresight, because, sometimes we need to, it's not that we need to, it's just that sometimes we get kicked around when we're new. And so, that's how we learn. Like you and I have told stories to each other before where the people who we worked with were not supportive, and that pushed us to the next place. So can you tell me a little bit about that, and then how you sort of built your business and how you got to this place today?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel this is going to sound a little self-deprecating, and I don't mean it to, but I do feel like for a good portion of my professional life, I've been underestimated. And I think that I've managed to utilize that to my advantage, really. And, I think I haven't been the flashiest. I haven't been the sort of right out front all the time leader in my industry, but I'm very content to be a bit of a dark horse, and that sort of slow and steady approach to success has really fit well with me. And it doesn't, for me, it feels like a more natural fit. And so, having been pushed around, and honestly, for me, that really started when I was around 19 and I became a supervisor in my brother's restaurant, where I was supervising people who were twice my age, in some instances, 3 times my age. But by that point, half of my life had been spent in a restaurant. And so I knew the workings of it very well, even at that age. And so I dealt with, some attitude, and obviously not being immediately accepted. So I'd had that historical practice that I could draw on as I went into my own business. And you're right, it was absolutely when I owned my own company, not if. I think it was just sort of a foregone conclusion that ultimately one day I was going to run my own reporting firm. And so just drawing on a bit of a history of being underestimated at times, or not necessarily being the one right out front all the time, it really has allowed me to focus on what is the true meaning of success for me, which is skill and quality and supportive mentorship, teamwork, a wonderful working environment. It's not wonderful all the time. That's impossible. I certainly have not made all the right moves all the time. That's also impossible. But also allowing space in how the business develops, for there to be failure and for there to be room to grow and to learn from the mistakes that I've made over the course of my career. And I really think that that's been a huge part of it, is that I'm not afraid to grow. I'm not afraid to learn. I'm not afraid to fail. That's just another opportunity to get it right, faster, better, smarter the next time around. So all of the life experience that I had leading up until I was 32 years old when I bought Veritext positioned me for what the success that I've enjoyed, these last 16 years.
What I also love about you is how you draw other people to you. When you look at your website, your leadership team are all women. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as you've acquired other businesses, as you were building your business, you were drawing people in as a team, as opposed to, you know, just acquiring a business and saying, thank you very much, and on we go. You know, you were creating, it was like you were putting the blocks together for your tower. Can you sort of expand on that? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, obviously, women in leadership is just something that's ingrained in me. Really, my mother worked right alongside my dad in the restaurant business, and she's a formidable woman. And I learned a lot of my leadership from my mom simply by observing and watching. She and my dad have very different leadership styles, and you know, my desire to run my business in a very specific way just sort of naturally lent itself to having women at the helm. Historically, this industry has actually been a very male-dominated industry. But, you know, if you're looking back 60, 70 years ago, even further than that, most of the court reporters were men. And of course, over the years, that shifted as it became more, it was seen more as a secretarial type of skill or technical program. And so now there are a lot of women who are involved in it, but we're getting more men in it as well, which is really nice to have that balance. And so when I was sort of creating my business, of course, when I first acquired Veritext, there were 6 of us, I think. It was extremely small. We had 3 or 4 or 5 court reporters. We were taking a handful of bookings a week. My sister was at my side running the business with me. She was sort of the back of the house. I would be the front of the house in terms of the client engagement, and she was running the mechanics of the business in the background. And she and I really built it together. We relocated it to where it's at right now in Cathedral Place, downtown Vancouver. And we just started building our team and it wasn't necessarily that we were specifically looking at building a female leadership team. It evolved that way because from my perspective, they were the ones who were best suited for the roles that I was hiring. And now looking at us nationally, with, of course, Veritext joined Veritext last July. So nationally now, very strong women as well at the leadership level in the company. We've also got some very, very capable, talented men as well. But that foundation has definitely been built where it is driven by strong, talented women.
So new people coming into this field, I don't know how to craft my question, but just because there's so many moving parts, it seems to me. You get this skill set, but you can use it for a million things. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And then also what options there are for getting this education and...
Mm-hmm. Court reporting isn't just happening in litigation. It's a skill that, you know, we call it court reporting. So obviously that in itself implies that there's a level of litigation involved. But the skill of learning to write machine shorthand is something that translates across a lot of different areas in business and life, really. So when you train to become a court reporter, there's only one school in Canada now, and that's at NAIT in Alberta, Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. And they will graduate anywhere from 12 to 20 students in a year. And those students essentially have to feed the rest of the country to replace attrition due to retirement or career changes, maternity leaves, all sorts of reasons why reporters might leave this field. But in addition to there being so few of them that we graduate, they also have options to go into or captioning, broadcast captioning. So CART is an acronym for Communication Access Real-Time Translation. And it is shorthand writing for the deaf and hard of hearing community. And so, and working with late deafened or hard of hearing clients is a vastly different than it is working with lawyers. When you're working with lawyers, you're working with people who are also hearing the proceedings as they're happening. And so if you've made a mistake in your real-time transcript or your draft, the clients are comforted by the fact that you've probably got a backup audio and you can make that correction. When you're doing CART or broadcast captioning, the captions you'd see on television, that's your audience is deaf or hard of hearing community. And so it's quite a different approach to the skill, and it's a different audience that you are servicing, basically. So with new people coming out of this and when you come out of this program, you're not going to go right into real-time reporting. You're not going to go right into captioning or CART. I mean, some people will, but it takes a real special kind of person to do that, and that's a huge leap. Your dictionary just isn't as mature as you need it to be. If you're young, you just don't have the vocabulary and the life experience either, and that can make it even that much more challenging. So it's one thing to learn Latin and legal phrases and case law for closing arguments in a courtroom. It's entirely another to now start captioning hockey games or other live events that have lots of names thrown at you. So it's another pull for a very limited resource. I think there's also this idea that we're obsolete. Like,
yes,
are we still needed? Why are you still doing nothing? Why doesn't technology just replace you? Well, of course, as we know, there is AI technology that captures voice and translates it into text. However, the accuracy rate is nowhere where it needs to be. And utilizing that for the litigation community is one thing. Utilizing that for CART and captioning is entirely another. The homophones, the incorrectly translated phrases are extremely prevalent in this technology at this point. Now, it's certainly making strides. When I first started court reporting, I kind of would say, a lot of us would say, we don't think that AI is going to replace us in our career. I don't know at 47 years old that I can say that now with the same level of confidence that I did back then. It's certainly not there yet. We're at about anywhere from 65 to 80% accuracy. And you put that in an environment where you've got multiple speakers talking at the same time, soft-spoken speakers, heavy accents, interpreters, highly emotional witnesses who are crying. Now you've got all kinds of environmental situations that are going to impact on the product that a computer can ultimately produce. There still needs to be that human involvement. And so we're definitely not obsolete. We absolutely have a crushing demand for steno reporters. So anyone listening to this, if you know a person in your life who is thinking they want to get into court reporting, absolutely, please do. I will answer any questions you might have. That's how I got into it. In fact, I heard about it and I called up and All-Star Reporting and spoke with one of the reporters there. At the time, it was a firm by a different name, but the reporter that I spoke to is still reporting. She convinced me to become a court reporter by answering my questions. I thought, this is the career for me. It sounds fabulous. Flexibility, excellent income, learning something new every single day. And interestingly, when Veritext acquired All-Star Reporting a couple of years ago, that reporter is still on our team. So it's interesting to have that come full circle for me. But no, we definitely need more reporters in this business.
That's what I was going to ask you, because, I think a lot of people, they become legal support staff, or, if for whatever reason, they're not going to become a lawyer. So they become legal support staff or even a court clerk. There's just a little piece missing. I think a court reporter would fill that, because well, number one, you get to witness all the proceedings, which is way more fun. But also, if there was I saw Perry Mason, and this is what I love about, you would get that fix as well. And it's both, you use your body as well as your brain. You have to be really agile and tactile, and you have this language, which a lot of people who are only using AI, they don't have that anymore. And sometimes even when I'm on the phone, I type while I talk. right? Or I type while
Absolutely.
somebody else is talking. So and they're like, how do you do that? And that's how I think I can do that. My fingers just do it. Right?
When I first was studying to be a court reporter, I would go and see movies with friends, and I would leave the movie theater absolutely exhausted because I spent the entire movie writing the dialogue on my lap as I was sitting there in the movie theater. Any words that I heard were coming out my fingers, whether I wanted them to or not. It was this, and then I'd miss some important plot points because I was too busy in my brain trying to figure out how I would write that, that word or that phrase. And, it's funny that you mentioned Perry Mason, because it's usually, court reporters are usually kind of groaning and going, oh, goodness sakes, really? If you're doing a show, couldn't you at least get a court reporter who can make it look like they know what they're doing? And you always see these big pools of paper, around the reporter's feet. They're usually, sitting with their legs crossed. It makes us laugh, that's for sure. And we often get requests for court reporting equipment when, not so much the last couple of years with COVID, but when with the filming happening up in Vancouver, Veritext would get phone calls about, can we borrow something? We need a steno writer. They didn't want necessarily one of our reporters because they had an actor or an extra or something playing that part, but I would always try and give them a little education about, okay, this is how this person actually needs to sit. This is what they should look like they're doing. But I think, Ramona, you're right. It's the court reporting piece. It certainly scratches an itch for people who have a passion for law, who have a passion for the drama of the courtroom. One of these days, I should probably write a book about some of the stuff that I have seen in court and seen in Discovery. I've kind of seen it all. I feel like I've seen it all. And it's one of these careers where you learn something every single day. And I had a witness ask me years and years ago when I first started, oh, it must be really dull hearing, doing the same thing over and over again, or hearing these same stories about car accidents or divorces or what have you. And sure, the mechanics of a car accident are kind of the same, and the mechanics of a divorce are kind of the same, but all of the people participating in those proceedings have very unique stories, very unique lives. They've all had their own forms of adversities and struggles and triumphs. And, the day I get tired of hearing about people and learning about people is the day that I know I need to retire from this business. And I can't imagine it's going to happen anytime soon. You have to have, in addition to a passion for litigation, if you're going to be, a court reporter, you also need to have a passion for words. You need to get fired up about debating the pros and cons of the Oxford comma. You need to get fired up about, should we put a semicolon here? Or, is this do we hyphenate this compound modifier? These are the kinds of discussions I look forward to having again in person with our reporter base here in British Columbia, and even across in Toronto or in any of the other cities where Veritext has got reporters now, where you bounce ideas off of each other, and you try and solve the sort of lifelong dilemma of how do I punctuate conversation. It is really challenging to punctuate conversation. We can't change the words around. We don't have the luxury like a creative writer would. We're stuck with what we're given, and then we have to try and figure out how to make it readable. So
it's really interesting.
It's a little bit of everything in this industry.
That's really interesting because, I've had to sit and listen to the conversations amongst lawyers about that kind of thing. And a lot of it is stylistic. And a lot of it I see as, or I have seen as, a generational, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm working with somebody a little bit older, they want to see this way, and they love the semicolon and the colon, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're working with somebody younger and they don't even know what it is and they don't capitalize anything. And so there's that stylistic sort of view, but also I have done an appeal to the Court of Appeal of British Columbia for about a one word mm-hmm. in a transcript. And for the life of me, because it was so long ago, probably 20 years ago or more, I can't remember. It was like is or on or some, it was like something small, but it made all the difference to the case. Mm-hmm. like all the way to the Court of Appeal. That's nuts. But those words, you're so right. They're so important.
It was probably a difference between, should it be or and?
Maybe.
Because even something as simple as that would change. It could have huge ramifications about, especially in contract law. And one of the great things about language is that it's constantly evolving. And while we can get stuck in our traditions of, commas and capitalizing legal terms like affidavit or notice of civil claim or what have you, thankfully we don't do that. I think kind of consistently we no longer do that. I know there will be some lawyers who will capitalize those words forever, and litigation is, law is steeped in tradition here in British Columbia, elsewhere too, but this of course is my wheelhouse in this province. But it's interesting now, even with, we do a lot of work with Indigenous and Aboriginal groups. We do a lot of lengthy trials. My first big trial that I did was way back in 2001, the Tsilhqot'in Nation, and
my first Aboriginal trial too.
Exactly. I think that's how you and I met, and with Mr. Justice Vickers, and learning about language in a very different way with the Aboriginal orthographies and how to capture the words in the transcript. And then of course, over the last 20 years, having done more and more of that work, and currently working on a huge case in Victoria, where it's a real gift for me, because I have an opportunity now to learn and grow and develop my understanding of language from the First Nations perspective as well, which is, usually, for instance, we would put Latin terms in italics, or we would put foreign words in italics. Foreign, define that however you would define that. If somebody used a French expression, laissez-faire or something along those lines, and they use it in the transcript, we would put it in italics just to indicate that it wasn't a native English word. Well, now, how does that work with First Nations language? And what we might think is appropriate in terms of grammar and style and punctuation for whoever writes the grammar, style, punctuation, Chicago style manuals, what have you. That's one perspective. But now let's make this relevant to the people whose language we're actually applying these rules to. And so, going back to what I was saying earlier about sort of being very open to growth and learning and development and understanding that maybe I haven't gotten it right all the time, and now there's an opportunity to get it right, is a real gift, I find, in the world of court reporting. If you have an open mind and you're willing to learn, then we don't need to capitalize everything we used to. We don't need to put commas everywhere. There's all kinds of different ways that we can punctuate that doesn't make it clunky and cumbersome. And we need to be mindful about what we capitalize, because capitalization matters. And especially in law, because a lot of it, first of all, will imply a defined term. Mm-hmm. So now, lawyers are very used to that approach. But capitalization also imparts a level of importance. And that is another thing we need to be mindful and sensitive to. So you're going to have to shut me up, because I could keep going on this for days and days. It's fascinating to me. And, on my team, I've got people who are trained, not just in English, but drilling down into parts of speech and drilling down into, all of those fun words like dangling participles and, all of those, not way beyond the verb and the adjective and the conjunction and the preposition, and really understanding how the language fits together, but now also applying modern day sensitivities to it and sensibilities to it. It's so important.
And cultural.
Exactly, and cultural. But now, of course, as neutral parties to a proceeding, we've got to balance all of this with maintaining our impartiality, and also being really careful that we don't inadvertently get pulled into strategy. We don't want our transcripts to find themselves in a place where because we've chosen to capitalize something or we've chosen to italicize something, it's landing on a client or a party in a way that is now giving it a level of weight or meaning that we were not intending. We were just following our standard, applying our typical standard grammar and punctuation, conventional or traditional or contemporary or whatever. Which is why it's so important that if somebody comes to you and says, hey, you capping this word or you italicizing this word has a different meaning for this group of people, and let's have a conversation. Right. And I welcome those conversations, and I'm having them regularly now.
I didn't consider that, which is really funny because of course. Mm-hmm. If I was brand new, if I wanted to become a court reporter today, what would I do? How would I start? And what do you think that my best sort of qualities or aptitudes, what could I bring with me?
Well, the first thing I would suggest you do is contact Leanne, who's our director of court reporting, and she will help you in any way you would need. So that would be the first thing I would suggest, because you really want to talk to somebody who knows the business. You want to get that firsthand information, because then when you start telling, if you talk to a court reporter and you start telling them your story, they're going to be able to, tell you whether or not you're going to potentially love this career, because it's a big commitment. There's a financial outlay, of course. You'd have to, there's an online opportunity now where you can take the program online, so you don't have to move to Alberta, which is nice.
Right.
But I'd say in terms of a skill set or an aptitude level or an interest level, you need to love learning. You have to have an absolute intellectual curiosity and a thirst for knowledge. And if you don't have those things, then you will be bored to tears in this job. You have to have a real passion for excellence in the product that you're ultimately going to deliver. You need to feel a passion for getting it right, producing an excellent, accurate, verbatim product. And so if you happen to tend towards the that's good enough when you're editing your essays in school or things like that, this is not going to be the career for you. If you love playing the piano, if you love playing basketball or volleyball, if you love any kind of sport that requires you to coordinate your eyes and your hands, then you're going to have a natural affinity for this. In addition to playing the piano and started playing the organ when I was 4. And then I played basketball for most of my, going through school, and then playing the piano after that. And so that got my hands working in a corded way, which really is a key for the skill set for becoming a court reporter. You also, if you love routine, if you love the Monday to Friday 9 to 5, if you love knowing exactly what you're going to be doing every day, this is not the career for you.
Right.
You will find yourself in a constant state of frustration. I can't remember how many times I got myself up, all dressed, hair, makeup, suit, walking out the door, and I get a phone call from the office, your job just canceled.
Right.
All right. So now I've got a day where I can edit transcripts or do whatever I now have a freed up day. You never knew. And 30 minutes later, you could have gotten a panic phone call. Don't keep your pantyhose on. You're coming into the office. I need you to do another job. And so that was very, very unpredictable. Schedule interrupters were an absolute foregone conclusion in this business. They still are. We're working with lawyers. They're working with clients. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of moving parts. Now we have heaps of technology involved with Zoom. At some point, anything or something or everything could go wrong. So you really need to have a go with the flow attitude, and you really need to embrace not needing to have that predictability in your life.
Right. Boy. Well, I mean, to me, it sounds fun, but
to me too.
Maybe not for other people. I don't know. But I'm in litigation, so I like that.
I agree. I love it too. I love the drama of it. I've had some very, very cool moments in a courtroom where this is what I'm living for. And on the days when I've got you know, a particular psychiatrist in Vancouver who shall remain nameless, who speaks at least 260 words a minute, and I'm just crushing it. It's days like that where I just feel like, first of all, these clients are getting the transcript of, you know, this is like the best possible work I could give you.
Right.
I'm totally on it. Other days I'm all thumbs, but today I'm rocking it. And it's in those moments where you just think, oh man, I love this. I absolutely love this.
If you only knew how good this was.
Right. Let's talk for a moment about how incredible I am, shall we? and when you have someone acknowledge your work as well, and they're like, how are you getting this down? This is incredible. It's extremely rewarding and fulfilling. And then of course there are days when you're totally crushing it and counsel points out that one thing you got wrong in the last 15. So you have to have a thick skin, especially if you've got your eye on doing real time, which is, essentially as people are talking and you're writing on your shorthand machine, it's coming out in English text across everybody's screens, oftentimes over the internet for people who aren't even in the same room as you are to watch it streaming across their computer. You really have to have a thick skin, and you've got to have a sense of humor, because chances are good you're going to hit the wrong key and something's going to come up on that screen and it's going to be hilarious, or it's going to be mortifying, or it's going to be confusing. And you really need to, this is where you really need to just crack out that you have to be a total pro and not crumble under it, because I've had some cringy moments for sure.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank you, Christy. First off, is there anything that I haven't asked you that you feel is important for our viewers to know?
That court reporting is absolutely still a very, very viable career. And we've talked a lot about mentorship and women in this industry. It is absolutely an excellent career for anybody. It doesn't matter your gender. It really doesn't even matter your age. It's definitely easier to learn steno when you're younger. I'm not even going to try and pretend it's not, but that's simply a factor of we learn things easier as younger people than we would if we're in our 50s, or I couldn't imagine learning steno at this age. But it's just such a fun, rewarding, thrilling career. And you get to lead in your own way, and you get to mentor, because every time there's a new reporter that comes in a year after you've started, you're going to have an opportunity to help raise them up as well. And it's just this sort of the cycle of teaching and learning and growing, and you do it together. I've got 20-something-year-old reporters who will teach my 50-something reporters things, and we just constantly learn from each other.
Right. That's awesome.
It's wonderful. It is. It's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I'd really like to thank you for joining me today. And also, I'd just like to thank you, as somebody from the outside who has watched you and your career sort of as it's wound its way around. And every once in a while, when I looked at your bio and I could see a bunch of the cases that you had listed, I thought, oh yeah, me too. But it's been a real inspiration for me to watch somebody who we're not really peers because we don't do the same thing, but we're definitely colleagues in that we run in the same circles, and to really watch you rise up the people around you. And you've just been such an inspiration to me. As a business owner and as an entrepreneur, and you just are a forward thinker, and I really appreciate you a lot. And I appreciate the time that you've spent with me today. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Ramona. This has been a really fun opportunity. This is officially my first podcast. I've never done one of these before. And I can't imagine doing it with anyone else. You've got a real spark in you, and you're so lovely and engaging. And we've known each other a long time. And even though our paths haven't crossed, on the regular, obviously we made an impact on each other, because when they do cross, it's like all that time just sort of melts away.
Totally. And we literally could be here all day.
Yeah, we absolutely could. 100%. 100%. And when I come to Victoria soon, let's find some time to do this in person.
That would be great. Thank you again.